What's up, dudes? Max here. So over the past week or so, I had a unique opportunity to check out an early release of Lies of P Overture, which is the new DLC expansion that's coming out for Lies of P a couple years later now, which is pretty crazy. And thanks to NeoWiz, we got a quick preview session of some new modes, some new gameplay stuff, a lot of new weapons and things like that. So kind of wanted to break things down, seeing as Lies of P was my personal game of the year back in 2023. Yeah, pretty excited about this, and I think my overall impressions of this session just leave me to be excited all over again. And I'm going to talk about, at first, the couple of different scenarios we got to play. One of them was highlighting some new modes, and there is new modes in Lies of P Overture that are specifically there to sort of enhance the experience from the core game leading into the DLC. And that is new challenge mode stuff, where there's a mode called like Battle Memories, and it allows you to fight against previous bosses just like right out the whim. You don't have to like run back or do story mode stuff. You can just progress through like 5 difficulty tiers of bosses, and the first 3 are initially available. You unlock the other tiers by defeating that boss and, you know, getting the harder challenge unlocks. And then there's also a thing called, I think it was called Death March, where you can fight a whole bunch of different bosses with like different health items and all this like stipulations, but like a whole bunch of them in like a row in a way. So you can sort of set up like a 3-boss scenario if you wanted. From these situations, they presented different bosses that we had normally played in what was a campaign snippet of the Krat Zoo that is going to be appearing in Lies of P Overture. And I'm going to talk about that in a second, but the more important thing is that, now I don't want to get into too many specifics and details about these bosses, but some of them had some pretty interesting sort of like mechanical nuance to them. One of them is quote unquote, and this isn't too much of a spoiler, but a puppet boss. And a whole bunch of that was a lot of like managing your camera and perspective against which one do I focus on type of stuff, which I thought was kind of a cool dynamic and took a little while to get used to, but once you get used to it, it's pretty satisfying. There's another boss in this demo that is you know, very Ludwig-like, is all I'll say. And I absolutely loved it. Didn't get the chance to like beat all of these even on the base difficulty because they were really hard and we were sort of getting reacclimated to the buttons and controls of anything and everything of Lies of P. But I was super impressed by all 3 bosses that were in here. All 3 of them had a very different tone. All 3 of them were doing things differently mechanically throughout each one too. And they were very refined. And that's one thing that I'm going to be saying a lot throughout my initial play session of Lies of P Overture in this preview, is that this feels really refined and really polished, even in comparison to what was already an extremely polished game that was Lies of P in its vanilla state. So outside of that, yeah, new modes, new cool stuff. There is a thing that they're adding to the game, which is an overall like difficulty slider or difficulty settings. Going to be a new base game patch that even allows you to change 2 new difficulty settings, which are called like Butterfly's Guidance and Awakened Puppet. And they're for people that are just looking for a more story-focused experience. And the default game setting is called, I believe, Legendary Stalker. So that's the one that we kind of played initially when the game came out and what we played in this demo. So that's cool. It's just neat that there's going to be more people to play the game on like easier difficulties, more health pools, maybe like just access to see stuff that's in the game that leads you on the adventure. So I have no issue against that, but I pretty much played on the default. And yeah, it's challenging, man. I was definitely getting beat up quite a bit. What I loved about this is I really loved the level progression. So you begin the campaign demo in like a snowy area. And oh yeah, by the way, that's a freaking gunblade. It's just straight up. The main character has a gunblade now, and there's a lot of other weapons that are of unique variety and are brand new weapon types that are added to the game. Some of them are like boss weapons that come with their own intrinsic like physics and abilities, while others are the usual like crafting, putting one piece of a weapon together with the other and getting a multitude of abilities, which was similar to the initial game in Lies of P. But yeah, the gunblade I kind of stuck with throughout the majority of it, and one other weapon, and I had a lot of fun. But it's not what you think it is. It's not like a normal weighted sword. It's very much a heavy sword, like almost like a great sword situation. So, but I liked it. A lot of cool mobility, all of its extra attacks allow you to move around a lot more. That's very fun and obviously quite inspired. But yeah, getting back to the level design, it's great, man. It's obviously super linear levels with, you know, basic enemy character placement similar to a Souls-like. But I just love the storytelling progression. You begin like in the woods, in the snow, as you're making your way through, learning more, seeing more as it comes, and you like crest the horizon and see Krot Zoo in this great big like epic landscape shot, which I just, you know, love about these games. So once you actually get into the zoo, it's moody and spooky, and there's a bunch of like deformed and crazy animals. There's like a giant dead giraffe that is just like in the background as a set piece. It's cool, man. It just fits the vibe of the initial Lies of P even more. And I was sort of getting the feeling as I was playing through this and being reminded that, man, like, I've played a lot of other Souls-like since this came out, and the parry window in Lies of P is really shallow. Like, it's really specific. That as I was playing through this and engaging with the enemies and sort of reminding myself, oh yeah, dodging is really good. You don't just have to parry everything. I was having a lot of fun, and it sort of like reminded me why I like Lies of P so much, because you had a multifaceted approach to every single boss fight, and it felt like the devs were fairly confident that people like this, people like their game design, their theory about how combat sort of works in Lies of P. It felt confident, is what I'm trying to say. It felt like they really knew what they were going for, and now that people are enjoying it, it's a full send commitment. Here's some crazy weapons, here's some like new mobility with those weapons, all that kind of stuff. Also, the arms that you get, there's some pretty great like practical use ones now. I remember in Lies of P, how you used the arms and what they were good for was kind of specific at times. And some of these had some pretty like easy to use general damaging things that shoot out like spinning blades or something like that, act as like a shotgun in some way. Use case scenarios that are kind of like, you can just use this sort of at any point and it would just be good against most enemies, you know, instead of kind of like tailor-made situations with like the grappling hook and stuff like that. You really got to be ready for that, or ready for a specific boss. But yeah, making my way through the level, it's nice. There's a lot of different paths and branching paths, a lot of items, a lot of discoverability. Going indoors, outdoors, like this zoo feels massive by the time I was completing this demo, and it pretty much ends on a big boss fight that was different than the boss fights that we experienced in the different multi-bosses that we talked about earlier, the revisiting boss fights we talked about earlier. And it's a giant, like, deformed, crazy demon alligator. And this thing was tough. This is very much one of like the monster fights, and you get in Lies of P traditionally sort of like big creature fights and also human fights. And in that game, or at least in the base game, I really loved both of them. Some of them in the creature side could get a little cumbersome because their attacks are just so big at times, and figuring out how to get around that would just be kind of tough. But ultimately speaking, I liked them. I think there was a nice balance between one-on-one human sort of fighting and also big monster fighting, and this was definitely leaning into the big monster stuff. But I was able to beat it. It was enjoyable. It took me several times. I was trying to use as many of my resources as possible to show them off and also show off new weapons and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, if this is just going to be once again representative of the game, it feels like Lies of P, obviously, once again, but clearly a lot more confident, and they're giving us a lot more tools and sort of crazy things to work with, instead of just sort of being sort of like just a heavy-handed character, just moving in and out of areas sort of slowly. They want you to still be doing that, but it feels like the combat freedom is opening up a bit more, which is kind of what you expect out of an expansion. It very much reminds me of what Bloodborne sort of did with its expansion, that it's hard to imagine going back to, you know, the base game once you get Old Hunters. And I really hope that's the case when we get the full story of Lies of P Overture and we see how the entire game is. So yeah, that's about it. I want to give a big shout out to NeoWiz for inviting me out to allow me to play this version of the game. And I'm very much looking forward to the game when it eventually does release. I don't think we have a pinpointed release date yet as of right now. Hopefully that will get announced soon, but I think it is something close to like a summer 2025 timeframe. So maybe somewhere around Summer Games Fest we might learn something more. That's not a confirmation, I'm just making a huge guesstimate here. But yeah, I'll be back with more. I'll be also likely doing a full playthrough of this, just like we did with Lies of P originally on the channel. So if you guys want to stay tuned for that, I appreciate a thumbs up or a like on the video. And if you guys like Lies of P, go ahead and leave a comment below. My name is Max, and I'll see you dudes next time.
size of that thing! Is that how big they normally get?